Hi guys. Hi guys. How y'all doing tonight? Boy, it has been a busy day. I started real early this morning and had to go pick up some firewood. We took the wife to work, go get firewood, then run home, grab something you forgot, go to the shooting range, return the gun that was graciously loaned to me to do part of the shotgun video over on Rumble. Um, Talk to the guy a little bit about that, go down to the other range, shoot the video that's going to post Saturday on Rumble, go pick up the wife, take her, grab lunch, go and by the vet, go by the place, buy the cat food, go by the place and drop off this, go by the place and pick up that, blah, 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 blah. I've been going since 7 a.m. Good evening, Justin. Good evening, Kodak. So it's one of them days that it's going to be good to go to bed tonight. Hiram, good evening. Randy, good evening. 2020, good evening. You just get to the point where it's like, can we take a nap now? I was promised a nap, you know. Oh, man. One of them things. Let's make sure speakers at 49%. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, it shows I am transmitting. Make sure everything is up and going. Brett, good evening. Taxman, good evening. Will Killingsworth, good evening. Pretty good. Stacy Sparks, West Virginia, hello. Tim Pierce, hello to Eastern North Carolina. Buck 112, hello to Northwest Georgia. Sanford Brown, good evening. Jamie Harris, good evening. Number 1 Big Bear, good evening. Michigan Silverback. Yeah. Good. Glad you made it in. Hiram, good evening. Yeah, spring is right around the corner. It's going to be an early spring for us down here. Kent Aldridge, good evening. Mudslinger, good evening. Yeah, we're seeing the signs already. Everything's turning green. The grass is already turning green everywhere and all the stuff. The fields are full of all the Latuca virosa, all the dandelion-like stuff is blooming. The pine trees are already starting to bud out and etc. They're going to have cones pretty soon. The cars are being covered. We're in high pollen right now. The robins have showed up, so we're going to have a cold snap. We may even get a little snow middle of March. Mark my words. After that, it'll be over and it'll be nice and cool days, but nothing really bad. Rick, howdy. Yeah, Justin, usually the old saying was when a pecan tree buds out, it's over. It's springtime. Mudslinger new growth in the Midlands. Yeah, it's going to be an early. We've got the Maunder maximum, and the sun's pumping out more than average, so I expect an early spring out of this. James Singer, good evening to South Carolina. Twister, hello to France again. Awesome. Michigan Silverback was 62 up here today. Yeah, in February. We're hitting 70 something here today. I think it was like 72 at about like 2 or 3 o'clock. Don, hello to Las Vegas, New Mexico. Yeah, I'm going tomorrow to the lake, and my friend John Pankard and my friend Steve Kingsbury, Todd Gibson are going to come out. We're all going to get the lake. I got my canoe painted, and so I'm going to take it out for a maiden voyage and check her out and make some modifications to her, make sure everything's working right before I go further with more modifications. And Grouch gave me a couple of paddles of his, one of which is a very long beaver tail that really is, I would think, looking at it, too long for me. But Grouch and I are roughly the same height back in the day, and I know he used it to great effect. So it's an heirloom being passed down to me. I want to get it out and try it out. And also a broad bent paddle that I've used a bit paddle many times. So gonna get it out on the lake, try it out, see how it works. Just playing around a little bit. Jonathan Frisbee, hello, brother. Ain't even gonna even think about fishing. A little early for me yet, but of course, if they're just jumping left and right out there, I might get the itch. We'll see. That's the way it usually is you get out there and, nah, I ain't gonna, is that a bass? You know, I ain't gonna mess with, is that a brim? And before you know it, you're standing there with a pole. You just can't resist it. Paul, good evening. Yeah, Mudslinger, it's a time for some changes. The weather's gonna get a little bit loopy. I'm gonna make a prediction. We're gonna have a very active hurricane season. In the past, when we had this kind of weather pattern for winter, it meant a very active hurricane season. So we'll see. I hope it's nothing bad, but we'll see. The year Katrina hit was one of these type of years. Katrina went into the Gulf and she was a nothing. She was a Cat 1, I think, and she went to a Cat 5 in less than 12 hours and grew to be over 1,000 miles across. So when she hit Louisiana, she hit New Orleans, her outer bands were hitting me in Alabama. It was 1,000 miles across that storm. Buckeye 80, good evening. But by the way, I've added my niece Trinity contacted me, and she wanted to go to event in North Carolina in the 1st of May. It's at Harmony, North Carolina, and it's a big survival expo type deal. And she wanted to go to it, and so I'm going to be there. So that means I'll be doing. I'm going to Kentucky in the middle of March, going up there to that big Prepper Expo and all. That's in March. Then April, we've got the Silver Wolves, where we still got 1 or 2 slots open for the Silver Wolves. It's not completely sold out yet. And that will be beginning of April, start on the 4th, end on the 7th. And then the 8th begins my gathering. It goes from the 8th to the 14th. And then I'll get like 2 weeks, something like that. I think 3. Excuse me. And then I'll leave and go to North Carolina to do that event and then come home. And then the next weekend, I think it is, I go to Ohio for the Pathfinder. So I'm going to be a busy little sucker in this spring. And after that, I'm going to get a break by June. I'm going to need one by June. Okay, let's see. Catch back up. Jamie, are you teaching at the Pathfinder schools this year? I'll be teaching at the Pathfinder gathering. I've got 4 classes at the Pathfinder gathering this year, which is they're combining it with the base camp. Not exactly sure. I think it was another event that was the week before, and they're combining it into one. But I've got 4 classes I'm going to be discussing there at Pathfinder this year. Texas Joe, good evening. Buckeye 80, rain here all day. I'm sorry. Luckily, it's gone north of us. We've been clear skies and pretty down here, which is strange for us. We've been expecting it to be cold, wet rain. And the rains went north, and we're just nice and pretty right now. Stacy, wanting to try cast bullets for 30-30. Any thoughts? I had a favorite that was a Lyman mold years ago when I reloaded for 30-30. I don't recall the number right off the top of the name, but it was a flat point up there on it with a little bit of a truncated down to the body. And I really liked it in mine. And I would make a duplex lead. And what that meant was I had 2 pots. One was dead soft lead, and one was number 2 alloy lead. And since the bullet was nose port, so it came in and the bullet was upright, the base on the bottom in that mold, I would pour in I think it was a 32 ACP brass case. I made a little dipper. And so I would dip up that much of that number 2 lead and pour in, and that made the driving bands. See? And then once I did that on both of them, I gave it just a second and I shifted under and I filled from there up the top with pure soft lead. And what that made was a soft point bullet that would expand with a hard driving band core. And so it shot very well, but it was 2 kinds of lead. They'll glue right together. And that was one of my favorites for doing it because it would expand like a hollow point. It'd flatten out like you think of handgun ammunition, and made it very effective. Andy Knight, good evening. Common Sense Karen, good evening. Gordon, good evening. Jerry, good evening. Ronnie, hello. Yeah, that Lee 170 grain is a good bullet. I remember it. Play a sin nombre. Okay. Hello there. Donald, uh-oh. Hope you stay all right. Good evening, Todd. How you doing, brother? Todd, Pink's already out there at the lake. He called me up earlier and said he's already arrived. I said I'm going to be there at lunch tomorrow, and of course he shows up a day early, so it'll kill. Good evening. Randy, hello to Northern Michigan. Buckeye 80, do you have any reloading videos? Not at this time, but this summer, once it gets real hot and I don't need to be out in the heat that much, I plan on doing some reloading videos because I can do that inside, see. And I'll put them over on my Rumble account. I will announce when I did. I'm doing one about every Saturday, and the one I will post this time is about shotguns. Last week, this one is going to be about shooting the Kerr bullet and the Rogers and Spencer. But I will do some reloading later on, talking about how to get into reloading. Gray Wolf, good evening. Carlos, good evening. Todd, yes, sir. Pink is one of a kind. Love that old dude. But he wanted to get out of the house. He told me back in January, Blackie, I'm getting, cabin fever. We got to do something. He's willing to drive 6 hours to come get, so yeah. I wish I could have gone today, but I promised I was going to do this tonight. So I'll be over in the morning. Christopher, good evening. Bob, hello to Cincinnati. Brett Johnson. Okay, yeah, the gas checks work well, especially if you're trying to push it on the upper level of speed, you do it. A lot of it is how your barrel is. I've had barrels that didn't want a lead, did really good. And then I've had barrels that I could drop it down to where it was just hitchhiking down the barrel and it still wanted a lead. It's how well the rifling itself is finished. And that's where gas checks really come in. You got to keep it from doing that. Oh, Gray Wolf, cool. Packing them on Snow Dog. Gray Wolf, how long are your days now? Y'all are past the total blackness. Now you're actually getting sunrise and sunsets, right? Justin, yeah, cool. Give him a holler out there at the lake. Garen, good evening. Yeah, Gray Wolf, Kerr. It's a Kerr bullet. Does real well in all the replica guns. You don't have to modify it. It sits in well. Where the Johnson & Dow's got a small shank and the body's up here, it kind of moves that shank up further in the Kerr bullet. And it's a historic, accurate design, and it shoots well. So, Gordon, I'm looking for a 50 caliber muzzleloader bullet mold. LeePrecision.com will have them. Okay, Todd. Sounds good. Gain it about 6 minutes every day, probably have 8 hours or so. That's cool. Gulf Coast Pine Belt, good evening. Yeah, my sister, she married a fellow that was in the Army, and they eventually got posted to Alaska. And the thing that she didn't understand when she went up there was the fact that you'd have months where the sun never set, it just kind of went around, and you had times when the sun never come up. You get a little glow on the horizon, and that was it. And that took her a couple of years to get a grasp on. Gray Wolf, you're correct. If you have any kind of tight and loose in a bore, be it a choke or whatever, it hits the loose, the gas wants to blow by the bullet. And a lot of times then the best thing to do is to have not a gas check, but a soft on the back of a bullet. So it'll bump up to the large size and fill it. I had an old Turkish Mauser that obviously somebody down the line had been real enthusiastic with a cleaning rod. Because when you'd go put a tight patch, you'd start going down, you'd feel it get loose a little, and then it'd tighten back up. There was several places along. It had rifling, but either it had been corrosion that had been scrubbed out or whatever, but they was, like that. And so I created lead bullets in the back third of the bullet. I put a softer alloy so it would bump up like a muzzleloader bullet and would actually fill the bore. And so when it got that place, it'd just flatten out more, and then they'd squeeze it back down. And it shot accurately with that. But it was just a little extra work to do it, but it worked well. Outdoors Dreadhead. Hello there. It'll kill. Blackie, do you know how the pressures are between RS and black powder? They are comparable. RS is designed to be like 2F, and they're comparable. What it is RS is more powerful, but it's more bulky. So when you're using a volume measure, you will get about the right equivalent across the board. You don't want to weigh RS versus weigh black powder because you'll end up with too much. And if you're putting them into something you can compress it and you got room for it, which most black powders you can't overload because there's a limited capacity in the cartridge and it is not that sensitive. But then again, don't ever dump 300 grains into a rifle and put a ball on top of it and think it's going to go bang. And I have heard of people being that dumb. So the pressures should be comparable. But now the impulse is a little different. What I mean by that is any of the substitutes, of course, is a smokeless powder. They're making act like a black powder, and it's going to have a little bit sharper recoil to it because it is igniting and burning, quote, quote, faster, but not generating so much pressure. Carlos, thank you. Glad you like the one about the sleeping bags. Ronald, good evening. Oh, Ronald Green. Blackie, what is the name of the place that makes your gun butter? Oh, boy, I have that handy. It's handmade by... Just a second. Back on the tool bench. There we go. Okay. Handmade by... Hold on a second. Because I need my little detail glasses. These, I can see the computer screen well. These are the ones I use for reading. I can tell you what's going on 1,000 yards. I can't tell you what's going on 30 inches in front of my nose. So, there. Okay. Handmade by C as in Charlie, 3, G as in golf, A as in alpha, C as in Charlie.com. Let's see if you can see that. Right underneath. That's her shop. And you go there and they've got the gun butter, which is the standard stuff, and then the bullet butter, which is this. Bullet butter is more firm, and it's to melt and dip bullets into. And the other one is actually to be the lubricant in the muzzle loaders and etc. But as I pointed out to people, you can use gun butter in a modern gun. And in fact, when I go and shoot my 1911, I've run 200 or 300 rounds through it. That's how I clean it. I just take the gun butter and run it up and down real good, get it wet, let it sit 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and you'll wipe it, and 90% of the crud will come out on the first wipe. Turn the jug around, clean the patch up, go back in, and I'll have it clean where it looked like this gun hadn't fired in 5 minutes, just like that. No heavy scrubbing, no all kinds of stuff. It's my favorite cleaner user. Okay. Oh, yes, seasonal affective disorder with light, etc. Yeah. We have people down here. I had a teacher in a college that she would get depressed if she didn't have one of those special lights in the winter. Andy Knight, you thought about taking a Dixie 51 and turning it into a dance. Could you remove the recoil shields? Yes, you could probably do that. No problem. Kevin Munson, hello to North Carolina. I've thought about getting their 51 and then getting get a 44 caliber 51 and make a copy of the original prototype. And all it is a 51. They've rounded the top of the octagonal barrel all the way to the front, and then they turn it into a round barrel from there up. And it was in 44 caliber. There's just a few little things, but it's where they were trying to see if you could take that size gun and put a 44 caliber in it, and two, the new streamlined barrels. The way they did it was to make it look like that coming up. They knew it was on the horizon, the streamlined barrels that Colt was going to. And I'd like to make one of them as like I mentioned in a video a year or so ago that was the prototype that became the 1860 Army. And there's nowadays you can get 44 caliber 51 Navies everywhere. It should be an easy job to fabricate a prototype that way. Yeah, Jonathan, up there where you're at, yeah. Those satellites we get. The teacher friend of mine, she had one down here because when it got to be about end of November, she started getting depressed unless she had one of those lights. And that would run to about middle of February, and then she didn't have to have, there's enough light then for her to be okay down here. Oh, I get you, Brett. Yeah. You got a 1.25 inch bore cannon. Dixie Gun Works sells cannons in different bore sizes. Look at their catalog or contact Dixie and say, hey, I've got a 1.25 inch cannon, bore cannon. What's the starting load in black powder? And RS is to be a 1-to-1, go under. So if they say it's 300 grains, go like 260. See, come a little shorter and try it out. I mean, you're not going to hunt with a cannon, you're making a bang. And so it's what's the idea to do it? How much bang do you want? Gray Wolf, the Pieta revolves with a white finish. They've just stripped the finish off of it. Is all the metal is in the white, and it's easy to rust. You know, it looks good. It looks antiqued, but it's easy to rust. Carlos, there is a video. Go look in my cooking series where I did that. I seasoned a cold handle skillet. And also I took a Boy Scout mess kit that was a steel pan, did exactly the same way. And I walk you through step by step. I used, I want to say it was canola oil. And I used campfire in one of them. And I slowly, at the beginning, it's white. And by the end of the video, it's black. And it only took like an hour or an hour and a half to season that thing. So, but I do have a video in somewhere and all that miles and miles of footage. I know for a fact it's been several years, but I believe it's in my cooking video series. Look at it. I talk about seasoning a pan, and you'll see how it does it. Will exactly be what I do with a cool hand. Yeah, James Singer. I talked with Mark, and he's here in Alabama, and hopefully, I've got several of his moles. I understand there's other things coming down the pike, and if something new comes up, maybe I'll get one to do a review on. We shall see. That's about all I can say right now. Okay, let's see. Catch back up. Yeah, Gray Wolf. The that whitish. Well, now some of them with the fake ivory grip, that's not actually white. They do like a almost like an anodize on it. It doesn't rust that easy. If it's got the that kind of finish engraved, it's not the blank finish I'm thinking of, and it should not rust easy. It's actually coated, and you can nickel plate or silver plate or hard chrome for that matter. I knew a guy that sent off a 51 Navy and had it hard chromed one time. It shot great. You couldn't make it rust, but I believe he paid as much for the gun again to have it hard chrome, but they'll do it. Yeah, Andy, exactly. A plain, which now, to be honest, a lot of the ones that they call engraved, you can chuck it up. Take a piece of all thread, chuck it up. Where you put a washer on the backside with something to keep it from damaging it. Like a washer plug or something, wood plug. On the front end, put a big washer across, chuck it up and drill and spin it and take it and lay it into steel wool, and you can sand that thing just like a lathe and remove any of that and make it a plain cylinder. Pretty easy. It's not very deep. It'll sand right off. Gordon, are the striped bass running down there yet? I haven't heard that yet. Usually sometime along in here, it is going to happen and we'll hear about it, but I have not heard anybody talking about it yet. So it's time of the year for it for sure. Food out of that before it goes and tries to interrupt what we're doing. I had an update thing pop up on my channel. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm still transmitting. Yeah. But yeah, I'm about ready. I got a friend of mine that he keeps telling me we're going to go. There's a dam, a hydro dam over here at the Georgia border at Columbia. And the stripers come up to that and they can't get past that dam. And so they just kind of bottle up there and they go out there on these big, huge boulders, rip rack down from that dam, and they just do snatch hooks and snag them and bring them out. Big boys. Oh yeah, the Marshall. I know what you're talking about. Twister. I do not know that the Tony Lopez, and I don't know it. Yeah, great. Well, most today. Well, you can't blame them. I mean, actual engraving is very time consuming and requires a lot of work. And whereas you can roll engrave it or laser engrave it today and like that. So, Rebecca, good evening. But I know a couple of months ago there was a thing where they're bringing back out one of the British revolvers. Um, I don't the trainer or one of the British percussion revolvers was going to be coming back out. There was going to be a company producing them, and several people, like Bellevue and several others, spoke of it about it was going to be coming out. And I haven't heard any more about that since. I hope it does. I'd like to see some of these more obscure ones show up just to go in the collection. The best ones for real world use is going to be the Colt, the Remington, the Rogers and Spencer, and to a lesser degree the Spiller and Burr. Those are going to be the ones if you're really serious about wanting to hunt or use them as a field revolver, absolutely. But on the other side of that, you know, the Star revolver, the Savage revolver, there are all kinds of other guns that have been kind of lost because of it that I think would be a blast to have, you know, to put in the collection. Just to have a fun plinking gun that's different. I have no interest in ever owning a Patterson because it's a nightmare to take that thing apart and clean it. But at the same time, it looked great in a collection. And I will one day have one, but I just probably won't shoot it a whole lot. It'd probably be in the collection, you know. I want a Patterson and then the Walker, then the transition Walker I've got, then a first, second, third, you know, one of each one like lined up like that. That would be really, really cool on a mantle or something. We shall see. Ken Aldridge, Blackie, have you any experience with the Lamat? I have. A good friend of mine had one and shot it quite a bit. I borrowed a Lamat not a year or so ago and did a video on it. And my great concern is that loading lever is garbage. It's scary when you go to load it. You're sure it's going to just snap off the gun. And many of the originals did. You find them where they were just loaded with a rammer. And when I went to load that one I borrowed, I loaded one time on camera with the loading lever. And then the rest of the time I took the cylinder off and loaded it on the bench because you just know it, the way it is, it's just going to snap off. The Lamat was carried by a general. Generals don't shoot a lot. You know, that shotgun barrel underneath, yeah, that'd be great for get off me. But as a personal defense, once it's loaded, you know, 9 shots of 44 and then that 20 gauge buckshot load, yeah, it'd be very effective for that. But on the other hand, reloading it takes all day and you're always scared you're going to snap that thing off. It would not be a very effective field revolver at all. And the one that my friend had, old Leonard Bass, had back in the 80s, he had a cavalry model. He used to make 3 different models of it. And he had a cavalry model. And I was scared of that loading lever back then. That it was just going to pop off. You know, the screw that holds it on just doesn't appear anywhere near the required strength. Chris Evans, I would love to get my hands on a Star replica. The double or the single action Star. You know, I wouldn't mind the single action Star. The double action, even Mike Bellevue said they didn't work real well. Dances with Empties, good evening. Gordon, have you ever owned or shot a 58 Remington carbine? I have shot a Remington carbine several times, but I have never owned one. They're a lot of fun to play with. And but you got to remember that you got to hold it out here. And even then, the concussion is so close to your face, it's like somebody slaps you on the face, you know, because of the blast coming out around that cylinder. And it's a lot of fun to shoot. And I, one time, with a buddy of mine, walked around a field shooting at rabbits and stuff with his carbine. And as I recall, I went through like 2 cylinders worth shooting at bunnies, and I went back to my 51 Navy, and I gave him back that carbine. Because there was a reason it didn't take off as much. But it's very interesting to shoot, and the modern replicas are much better made than the originals. So, yeah. I think it'd be a fun, like I said, fun gun to put in the collection. Absolutely. When you went into Dixie Gun Works, and I, in the 1980s, was going to Dixie about once every 3 months because the job I had, I could travel. And if it was going anywhere near that part of Tennessee, I'd go through Union City. So if I was going to St. Louis, I was going through Union City. If I was in Detroit and I was going to South Carolina, I'm going through Union City, you know. And when you'd come in, old Mr. Turner was still around back in them days, and he's got all these collection in there, and a lot of them are original, and some of them are fake, and they tell you it's fake. And there was an 1860 Army carbine Colt sitting there, and really nice looking. And he had a little tag on it that said fake, but it was faked from original Colt parts. So somebody probably in the 1880s, 1890s made it. They just didn't want a Remington carbine. They wanted a Colt carbine. And so they made one, you know. But he said it's fake, but it's faked with original parts. So there's a lot of things that are just ooh in that case. Pocket Pattersons with a loading lever, you know, original, real ones. If you ever get a chance to go to Dixie Gun Works, go up there just to look at them cases. It will blow your mind what they got up there. It'll kill. Have you ever owned a 58 carbine? And what do you think about it? Very effective hunting gun. I had 5 in my life. I've had Zuavs and loved them, which is the 63 Remington musket. It just got the name Zuav hung on it, but it really was a very good gun, and I've taken deer and hog with it. Now, at the time being, right now, I've got a 3-blade Enfield. I have not fired because a friend of mine is going to get it off of me, and he wants it unfired. But yeah, they're very effective. The thing about it is you got to understand 58, you got to make sure that the bullet meets the bore. It's not just one size fits all. And most of them have to be sized. So it's not only you got to have a mold, you got to have a sizing tool. You got to find out what your bore is because there's like 4 sizes. And then you find out the proper sizing tool and you size it to fit your musket. And then it's a very effective long range shooter. So, which I shot mine with round ball and with mini ball. But I was lucky. The guy I got all 5 of those for was a Civil War buddy of mine. And I didn't do Civil War. I did Mountain Man. But he did Civil War. And he'd get this weakness for a Remington. And he'd get a Remington. And he'd tote it around a while. And then he needed money to get a Springfield. And so I'd buy the Remington off of him. It would come with it and a mold and a sizing tool. And then a year or so would go by, and I'd done traded it off, sold it off, whatever. And he'd get another one, and he kept going back and forth between Remington. I want a 63, or I want a Richmond, and he was jumping all over the place. And he'd always get a Zuov, and then I would end up with that Zuov. So I liked them. I think they, for a modern hunting gun, as far as using a muzzleloader, would be a very effective hunting gun out of a deer stand. Better sights and everything else. Christopher, I've been wanting a double action, but it sounds like it may be a bad choice. What are the drawbacks to double action? Timing. The most problem that you find is as long as you operate it slowly, it seems to be okay. But once you start trying to jerk that trigger like a modern double action, things start bending and getting out of the way. And soft parts that wear fast. And even Mike Bellevue talked about he had a double action and it never shot right. And he sent it off to get somebody to reharden the internals and see if they could get the timing right. So, but the original suffered from that as well. And the Army started out with the double action and requested that they remove all that and turn it into a single action. And so after the first run, they became single actions. And in fact, if I understand right, the military returned some of the National Guard state units returned some they had and had them converted to single action. So if I was going to get one, single action would be the way I'd go. Justin, give me a Parker Hale Muscatoon all day long or Sharp's carbine. Both those are good choices. Gray Wolf, hey Blackie, I have a Northwest trade gun, would be perfect for my purposes, but I don't like them. What do you think? Idea of a 20 gauge Harper's 1803. Well, if you get a barrel on one that'd be a 20 gauge, it'd be good. Um, Harper's made really good guns. Now the Harper's Ferry gun and the Harper Ferry rifle. The problem with the Harper Ferry lock is it's 290 degree. You know, you got that full throat around it. It looks like a semicircle, and so the flint hits the plate almost at 90 degrees. We people that had the for competition back in the 80s and 90s, they would take it and cut it with a hacksaw right underneath the bottom jaw, cut it straight through that opening, and then they would heat it up and bend it down so it would take the flint from being a 90 degree to angle it down, and then it was a great shooter. Otherwise, it destroyed the flints real quick. You'd only get like 3 or 4 shots, and then your flint was busted all to pieces because it was hitting dead on. And that stiff spring, it just shattered the flint. But if you angled it down, it would scrape and flip it. And that's one of the things. But if you get a 20 gauge barrel on one, yeah, it'd be a good idea as long as it was not like I'm talking about eating flints. Oh yeah, Twister, the French MREs. Y'all, I have seen quite a few reviews of French MREs. It's like a 5-star chef. I mean, you'll open up and there'll be goose pate and everything else in it. The French love food. I mean, you hats off to them. They dang sure do love their food. Lewis, good evening. Yeah, Grey Wolf, that aplanage for a while there, you couldn't. Well, Grey Wolf, check the surplus place that I use in Sampson, Alabama. That's Kaufman's Military Surplus, Sampson, Alabama. Phone number is 334 898 1770. I believe they've got some aplanage down there. I've seen it. I just don't know how much they got right now. But I've seen aplanage down there, both the ponchos and the LBE gear and the clothing. It was junk down here to us. It didn't work in our woods with the flip, so it didn't sell well. But I seem to recall seeing it hanging up on a hanger down there on some of their stuff. So might give those ladies a call. They might be able to set you up. And it'd be one of the 2 of the ladies that answer the phone. Just tell them Blackie sent you, and they'll hand select for you for free. Christopher, were there any cap and ball? Oh, wait a minute, Gordon. Good night, Gordon. Thanks for coming in. Were there any cap and ball double action that didn't suffer from the same complications as a star? Not really. Black powder fouled too much, and so if an action was precisely timed, it was very easy to get out of time. The Colt 1877 suffered from that as well. If you rough handled it, a lot of fouling, a little bit of rust, it was out of time. And it was really when smokeless powder came around where you see the double action really come into its own. And that's really the difference. They just don't time out well because any kind of fouling. When you shoot a black powder, like blah, it goes everywhere. It's a cloud, and under pressure, it goes everywhere. And so, even with a black powder cartridge, the Smith and Wesson Schofield top brakes, shooting black powder, they'll usually foul out with 3 cylinders or less, where you can't cock it, you got to hand turn it. And 11 Bang Bang, I believe, did a video of that a couple years ago where he has one of the modern replicas, and he shoots it in 45 Colt, and he loaded up black powder, and he went to shoot it. Bang, bang, bang. First time went fine. The second time, bang, bang, and about the third shot, he's having to take and turn the cylinder. It's fouling out. You know, they were too precise for the time. But once you add smokeless, it works great. Kent Aldridge. Blackie, are you familiar with the Paradox? Yes. Produced, I believe, Purdy Paradox. It had very aggressive rifling right there at the muzzle. They produced it would Paradoxes were really made up for the Indian market for British to go over there. It would shoot 12 gauge. It would also shoot buckshot. It would shoot round ball, and it would shoot. They had a special mold that created looked like a little Christmas tree, and they guaranteed that it would put the round ball or the Christmas tree in a 8-inch circle or 10-inch circle at 100 yards with it. And that was the Paradox. It would shoot like a rifle, and then it would shoot like a shotgun. And it was meant for those game hunters going to Africa and India, where you could take really big, dangerous game with it, or shoot grouse and pheasant and everything else. And so less guns to carry. And Ross Seifred did a really good write-up in Handloader magazine of probably about 1987, 1988. I still have all of those Handloader magazines, and where he taught in rifle magazines, and he talks about Paradox, and he did a nice big article talking about the Paradox and how he found the antique correct mold and how it got the shot, and it did everything it said it would do. Cool, Justin. Hope it happens. Christopher Good. Okay. Yeah, you probably be able to get. You think you'd be able to get amplifiers pretty easy. It's not like they're in a war over there a lot. You're not, you know. So yeah, I could see that with the contrasting colors, Gray Wolf. I could see that. Dances with Empties. The Brits had better designs with double action back then. Yes. The Brit percussion double actions, and they had several that were double action only, were fairly well made and reliable and didn't bind up. And their lock work, when you get inside and look at it, it's like, ooh, because it's designed to be fouled up and work fine. You know, it relied on fitting and quality instead of just bulk power to work. And so the Brits did have a really good lean on that back in them days. And there was a push there for quite a while for the British to adopt just a double action only. In fact, in World War II, World War One, they had the top break infield cartridge gun that was double or single, and for World War II, they made it double only. They took off the single shot notch and made the trigger pull harder, you know, because they didn't want guys to cock it. I mean, it was mostly for tank crews, and that hammer spur hung them up coming in and out of the tank. So they just removed it and made it a double action only. Tim Pierce, have you ever played around with a 30-30 with a spire point bullet for a bolt action, Remington 788? Got a reloading recipe. I have, but I didn't do it in a bolt action. I did it where single feed into a Winchester, and I used bullets, spire point bullets that were designed for 30 Savage They were the right diameter, and they were 170 grains in weight. And but since the tube magazine, I loaded them single shot into it and tried to do long range with it. But I can't tell you what the load is. It's been way too many years. I was playing around with that about 79 or 80. Back in my heyday when I was doing a lot with 30-30s and all kinds of guns. I was a poor little, white boy that knew how to play around with guns. And that's how I made my way into a lot of hunting camps and stuff, as I did gunsmithing stuff for groups and local cops and everything else. And I hand loaded all kinds of stuff. And that was something that I really got into back in them days. Uh, Blackie, is the wax shot slug actually huntable? Okay. Your local game laws vary. Okay. If the question is, are wax slugs actually effective? Absolutely. I can give you firsthand experience talking about that. It's like you stuck the muzzle of the gun up to the animal and pulled the trigger. My short little 20 gauge, for fun, we made up, oh good God, 2015 or something, we made up about 100 wax slugs. And I was shooting groups of under 6 inches at 75 yards with that little bitty single shot. And you'd put 2 pieces of cardboard. So here's where the target is. And then you go back about 8 or 10 inches and you put another piece of cardboard. The hole coming in would be, 62 caliber. The next cardboard had a pattern that big where it shatters on impact, and it's like a muzzle. Is it effective on an animal if you can hit it? Absolutely. But they are not legal for hunting in many places, so you got to find that out. I'm not going to tell you, yeah, but I can tell you from firsthand experience as a young man, they are very effective. But it's one of them things that is it legal where you're at to hunt with? See, that's the thing. Blackie, what is the emblem on your jacket? You talking about that one? German Bundeswehr. This is a 1980s German military moleskin shirts. They were surplus. This was what Germany was right before the wall came down. And then whenever Germany went together and formed their own, reunited, everything changed. But this was a Bundeswehr. I picked these shirts up for like $1 a piece of surplus. Love them. They wear fantastic, and it's called moleskin. It's a mixture of cotton and polyester. It doesn't itch. It isn't anything. Water will run off of it, not necessarily bead. It will get wet, but you can wash it in a standard washer, dryer, and everything. And they wear like iron. It's one of my favorite field shirts. Christopher, I swear you're a living encyclopedia. Veritable storehouse of useless information, someone once told me. I'm confused how you gain so much knowledge about black powder weapons. Are there books, websites? I started reading and being interested in black powder guns in 1970. I had my first black powder revolver, which I still have up there in the gun case, in 1976. I loved Old West, Civil War guns, etc. I read about everything, and that was during the heyday. You remember in the 1960s was the centennial of the Civil War, and so gun magazines, movies, everything. I mean, Colt had brought back out the Colt first reissues. Coming out of Italy was all of the Italian replicas. The guns were everywhere, plentiful and cheap. You know, I remember in the back of a lot of the shooting mags, there's this little bitty ad for $49. You could buy a brass frame 51 Navy, and they would mail it to you. You know, piece of junk, but it shot, and it was meant for the Civil War noisemakers. And so there was all kinds of information out about that. And so I read incessantly. I experimented with it. I knew a lot of Civil War guys. I was doing gunsmithing. I read Elmer Keith, Skeeter Skelton, John Wooders, Rick Hacker, Phil, Phil Spangbergler. And then later on, when Mike Ventrino came on the deck, you know, I read all of them, and I really got into it. And then I got doing my own living history reenactment starting out in the early 1980s. I went to my first national rendezvous in 1984. And then I did reenacting for 20 years. So yeah, I've got a type of memory that I remember probably 90% about what I see, read, hear. Not always perfect, but I do remember. And because that something that I had interest in, like guns, yeah, that was something that just really fascinated me, how they worked. Yeah, Dances with Empties, the trainer, the Dean and Adams, yes, they're very nice. Yes, the bicentennial was 1976. I remember it. I was there. BC, thank you very much. Oh yeah, the duck foot revolver, the Philly Derringer, the Twister, the little single shot with a tubular Queen Anne type barrel. A company would come out and make them for 2 or 3 years, and they'd go bankrupt, and another company would pick it up and start making it. And then CVA brought them out for a short amount of time. You could get the pistol kits, and then you could also they had knife kits. One was a tray knife, one was a Bowie, one was a something else, you know. And then of course you had Dixie Gun Works, and you had Navy Arms, and several others you could get kits out of. And I remember back when Shotgun News was like that thick, you know, and that was a big thing, you know, to go get the Shotgun News, and you'd go back page by page, and Dixie Gunwork would have like a 4-page ad. Navy Arms would have like a 4 or 5 page ad in there, and of course you could order them straight from the mail. And then there was EMF. EMF wouldn't deal with regular people; they only wanted gun shops, which the guns were not regulated, and anybody could order it, but they wanted to sell to gun shops. So if you called up EMF, they told you nope unless you got a gun shop to order it. And there was all kinds of guns and knives and little derringers. Um, Mike Bellevue is right now doing a little series where he's doing one of the Philadelphia derringers, one of the little bitty pocket derringers like Kill Lincoln. Um, and you'd think they'd be cheap because it's so small, but everything's so small and intricate. That's reason it's so expensive, because it is so small and intricate. Cool. Thank you, BC. Yeah, baits, kits. So you're right though. It was bait too. It's like, ooh, that looked good. Wouldn't Dad love for Christmas a 51 Navy kit? Wouldn't little brother love an 1860 Army kit? Wouldn't mother love the little Philadelphia kit? You know, yeah, it was bait. It'll kill. Blackie, if you were going to hunt with one muzzleloader, what caliber would you pick and why? Okay, I have to qualify this. If it's a long gun, what caliber would be? 62, which is 20 gauge. I can take anything with that, from rabbits and squirrels all the way up to moose, bear, whatever. So 20 gauge is what it is. One big solid ball or shot, either way. Flintlock. I don't need caps. All I need is powder. And with powder and flint, I can get flints. I can take coarse powder and put it in a wooden bowl with a wooden spoon and sit there and crush it up and make fine priming powder. So that would be my one gun if you're talking about a long gun. If you're talking about a handgun, it would probably be a 44 caliber 1860. Because with that, I can load down and still do small game, and I can load up and take big game, and I can do shot loads better for snake, which is a big thing where I'm at down here in the low south. And so that would be at 44 caliber 1860 or the 62 caliber Thule trade gun be the two choices. Yeah, Couch, I forgot about that. The old pepper boxes. You know. Right, Gray Wolf, they did. The old Hickory knife sets and A.G. Russell, and the Green River knife sets, and etc. Yeah, well, Randy, back in those days, Shotgun News was the source. Today, we got internet, you know. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, Twister, that's cool, yeah. Brian Holbrook, good evening. BC 44, do you have inserts for different calibers? Not in those. I do have inserts for my shotgun to shoot different calibers. I can shoot 38 9mm, 45 Colt 410, 22 long rifle. All I can think of right off the top of my head. And in fact, did I put it up? Or yeah, I put it up and only had it sitting over here on the table. But yeah, that gives you a great deal of versatility. Steve, well, welcome. Thank you for coming. It was Steve from Illinois. Thanks for coming in. I hope you enjoy them. Woo, that'd be nice. That Bruno 7.57 over a 12 gauge. Yeah, insert in that 12 gauge would be great. You can do a lot of versatility with that. Tracy, doing well. Pardon me. Terry. Sometimes these don't work. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit, I move and it kind of blurs it for just a second. Yeah, messy time of year. Yeah, Drew B. Goons Gun Works has a really good reputation for working on guns. Really, really nice. I've had Rob Hill, hello. I've had quite a few people ask me, Blackie, would I work on their gun? I don't do that work anymore. You know, that's one of the reasons I did my video series, so you can see how to do the base stuff and stuff like that. But I gave up gunsmithing a long time ago for the public because it's today in the world of these lawyers, you can't do anything without somebody, you know, wanting to sue you for it. So now I got out of it. I got out of gunsmithing about 96, 97, somewhere in there. Ken Aldridge, I have played around with making black powder back in the 80s as part of reenacting, but I haven't done anything recently. But now I love muzzleloader. Excuse me. And there's a guy on YouTube that does a lot of making his own black powder from all kinds of stuff. I think last time I saw he was making it out of toilet paper and stuff like that. You know, you can get out there and find out just about anything you want to know on the internet. Brian Bell, neck knives. Back in my early stuff, like 2009, 2010, I wore a neck knife all the time, which was a Mora. And so there's quite a bit of stuff back in them days. I like a neck knife when I'm going to be in camp and doing stuff a lot. I'll just take it inside my shirt. I can't fall on it because the way I got it hanging, there's just no way for me to fall on it. But then again, my favorite neck knife is a WC William Collins neck knife. I've got an old model. The modern one has changed, but that's a fantastic knife for all kinds of camp duties and chores. Oh yeah, neck knives can be really, real valuable around camp. Really. Yeah, Tim Pierce, barking a squirrel. If you got a gun and you're good and you know where to do it, you can do it. I've barked a squirrel before with 50 caliber flint. That is nite is my big Tennessee mountain rifle, and we were doing a living history trek from A to B across a friend of ours 2,000 acres. And so we got dropped off and came down the river, and then 5 or 6 of us would cut through the land, and you had to shoot it to eat it. You couldn't bring anything. You bring salt, that was it. And I brought that 50 caliber, hoping to get a hog, and I didn't, but I did get 5 squirrels. And you just aim like beside that head, bam, and the concussion and the bark hitting them would knock them down, and then you get up to them before they recovered and finish them off if it didn't kill them by the impact. But you got to be quick. They don't necessarily automatically die. It will stun them and knock them off the tree, and then they're kind of unconscious for a second. So don't pick him up and put him in your pocket. He will wake up upset in there, I'm here to tell you. Drew B, your cylinder gap video helped me out. Like, glad to help. What brand name and style is your wool hat? My wool hat is I got it in the early 1990s. There is an American company that if you look for it, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but it's called the Outback. And it's a slouch hat is what it is, a wool crushable felt slouch hat. And they make a modern one, and it's called the Outback. And it's an American company that makes them. They're like $65. I've emailed them back and forth. We're kind of bouncing back and forth. When they tell me yes, they're willing to do it, I will do a video and tell everybody where you can go get you one. Because I've been asked so many times. In fact, if you search my videos way back when, like 2010 or 2012, there's a video called About the Hat, because everybody want to know about my hat. So it's just that's a slouch hat, and very comfortable for me. It'll kill. I want to learn more about those cylinder swap kits for cap and ball. The Remingtons are the easiest, or the fixed cylinder, fixed frame, because you can just pull the pin, drop in, close pin, you're ready to go. And to reload, you just drop it out, pull the cylinder in half, punch out the empties, or hook them with a fingernail and pull it out. Drop in live, put it back in. Turns it into a 45 or a 38 cartridge revolver. In the Colt version, you got to knock out the wedge. And so it's more of a hassle for it. And then if you've got one that's actually got a loading gate and everything, has been converted to an 1870s cartridge conversion. And I have one that's an 1860 that's put out by Uberti. They scaled it up just to grunt to make it work, because 45 Colt will not fit in a standard 1860 Army cylinder. It's just not big enough for the rims. So they scaled everything up just like to do it. And it's a 45 Colt, and it's an 1860 Army conversion. Like would be a 72 open top is what it was. And it shoots very well. So. Brian Holbrook, sounds good. Oh, hello to the Philippines. Thank you very much, and good Friday morning to you. Hanging with the bullfrog. What's the advantage of the neck knife over a fixed blade on the hip? When you're sitting down in camp, when you're sitting down, things on your hip are kind of, like this, where the neck knife, you just pull it out and do whatever and put back. Now, if you're doing crafts or something like that, where it's going to be a lot of in and out of the sheath, I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to do it out. I'm going to put the sheath up and I got to do this. Now I'm going to pull it. Having a neck knife is superior to having it on the belt because of the constant having to twist your body around to pull it out. It's just easier. Now you can put it cross draw and etc. But then sitting down, trying to put it into a cross draw holster, you run the risk of sticking yourself in the belly. A neck knife, I can pull it out here and pull it out sideways, see, and see it. And so that's a distinct advantage for crafting or doing like cooking. I'm using it for food prep. I'm chopping this up and doing whatever, put it away, stir this up, come back and grab it again. It's just handier, especially where a belt knife, if I'm having to do the same thing, I either got to and put it back or lay it down, risk it getting dirty or whatever while I'm doing this. Neck knife I can keep relatively clean. Hanging with the bullfrog, good evening to you. I know what you're talking about, Dances with Empties, and I haven't had one in my hand, but I know what you're talking about. And it seems to be a fairly decent knife. Cold Steel makes, for the money, a decent knife. No, it is not epic, but it's actually for the money, and they got a good warranty. So, like I've said in many videos, when you're first starting out, you're going to make mistakes. Don't buy an expensive knife, because I would rather you, in those growing pains, making mistakes, if you're going to screw up and break a knife, I would rather you break a $20 knife than a $200 knife. You know what I mean? So once you get where you kind of get all that, start going with that. Cortez, what's your favorite camouflage pattern, Blackie? I would probably say the 1980s U.S. Army woodland pattern is my favorite. Now, having said that, I've got DPM that was Danish. It's a British pattern, but it was Danish. I wore quite a bit and several others. But my favorite would be that one, because I was around it so much. Seduce, good evening. Copper jackets and black powder revolvers. No, it wears out your rifling. If you try to take modern ammunition, like for 44, 45, 38 through 7, and try to put it into the black powder, it may go bang, it may shoot accurately, but the rifling in the barrel is not hardened. It's set up for soft lead. And so shooting that copper jacket, which is a whole lot tougher, dulls the rifling very quick, and very quickly you get a gun that can't hit the broadside of a barn. I had a friend of mine, wouldn't listen to me. He went to doing that. He loaded up 45 Colt, jacketed hollow point, jacketed semi soft points, shooting in his gun. He had got a cartridge conversion cylinder. And that gun had before been able to shoot like a 1-inch group at 20 yards if you did your part. In 500 rounds, it was an 18-inch group was the best it could get at 20 yards. You just watch the patterns open up. And what it is, the rifling is now, it's like you took a file of the rifling. And the copper, just wrong setup for it. So always go lead. Don't ever use jacketed stuff, because in emergency, life and death, yes. And the other time, no. It just wears out the guns way too quick. Mark Burris, good evening. Chris, should I force patina a carbon steel knife? You can if you want, but you don't have to. Just simply using it will produce a patina over time. Forcing a patina will reduce the chance of it rusting, You can also use gun bluing, clean it real good, put standard gun bluing on it, then clean it really thoroughly, and you're fine. I've blued blades before. If you're worried about them rusting, but that black oxide, that forced patina will cut down on rusting. And for a knife that's being used a lot, you really don't have to worry about it because you're using it. You're going to wipe it off, etc. Any surface rust you're going to wipe off. It's the knife that I use, and then it's going to be in the truck or in the box for the 3 months to the next time I go camping. That's the knife I'd want to force a patina on, because if I'm not pulling it out and looking at it every couple of days, it could start rusting, and I would not realize it until it was damaged when I pulled it out. Rob Hill, have you had good experience with your PCast Buffalo Skinner since your review? Yes, I really like mine, and it's been staying in the kitchen. Like I said, it is very close to a butcher knife I had years ago, and so I've carried it in the field. I'll be carrying it with me when I go camping this weekend. But I really like it, especially in the kitchen, and it's become my knife. There's a WC Nessie that I've got it in its sheath hanging up, and that's the wife's favorite knife. She grabs that Nessie, and so when I came in, I told her, this one is mine. Got it? Mine. It don't go into any of the drawers. It's mine. And so if I'm cutting up a bunch of meat, doing a lot of cooking, a lot of vegetable prep, I'm grabbing one of my knives, and I like that Buffalo Skinner. Really, really do. Yeah, dance with empties. I agree. I'd rather trash cold steel over my Benchmade. Yes. I've got a wide array of knives. Hello, Knives Anonymous. I'm Blackie. It's been 2 hours since I bought my last knife. You've seen the box of pocket knives. You see all the knives I've used. I got a big hanging selection of knives. Really, really good knives. And I also have some cheap knives up there. Because if it's going to be a job that could damage a knife, it's going to be a cheap knife. I've still got that tracker knife, the hunted version, that Chinese knockoff that I did way back when I did a review. I still got that. In fact, I pulled it out in December because we were going over to a friend's land to help him out. And now that everything's died off, it'd been a dog pen, and he wanted to clean out where the dog pen had been. And it's all kinds of wire and chicken wire and all that, and vines and everything else. And we were going to get in there and kind of sort it out, so we could clean it up. That's the knife I took. You couldn't use a machete. I couldn't use really a kukri in there. I needed a knife that would cut vines. Well, if I'm going to accidentally hook onto wire, and not realize it, it's going to be that cheap knife. I'm not going to use my WC knife for that. Would the WC knife cut it? Absolutely. Why do I want to abuse it that way? It's the cheap Chinese knockoff knife goes for this job. You use the good knife. Save the good knife, use the crappy knife for the crappy job. Ray Millsap, good evening. What do you feel about the Uberti number 3? Is it well made and accurate, durable? Yes, the number 3s are accurate guns. The sights are normally the thing. All of those Smith & Wessons, the sights are small by our standards, but they're accurate. They've worked out the things. Now, when they first brought them out back in the early 2000s, late 90s, they had a problem that they were not fixing. They fixed it now, and it was a hardness issue of things getting out of whack. That's gone now. And they're very rugged and reliable. You would not see them appearing in cowboy action shoots as much as you do if they were not, because cowboy action is all about getting the scores. And if it's not going to perform, they don't want it. They don't care what price it is. If it's not going to perform and it's not going to be durable and something I can't practice a lot with, they don't want it. So the fact you're seeing it in those competitions ought to tell you they're pretty decent. Dead Prepper, Blackie, have you ever hiked the Appalachian Trail? If so, how far? I hiked sections of it. I started out at the southern Hidden No northbound and did most of the Georgia part and some of the South Carolina and a little bit of the North Carolina and a little bit of the Virginia over the course of about 5 years with friends of mine. But that's about it. But that was back in my younger days when we would take a 3-day weekend and drive up and go hike. But that's about it. Chris, you're welcome. Oh, cool, Jerry. Those Mora companions seem to be very decent knives. Mark Burrs, yeah, those photo blue brown L's. I used to keep a bottle of that. But don't let your friends know about it, because everyone can I see that blue and I got a little bit. Yeah, I think I got 2 uses out of that first bottle, but all my friends did re-blue jobs on every gun they had. Go, you can borrow that blue for just a minute, And I came in one day and looked, and I had about that much in the bottom of that big old tall bottle. And what happened to all my bluing? And so now when I get those photo blue, I don't mention it. I ain't got no blue. I'm sorry, I'm out. Good stuff though. It'll kill. Blackie, is the lead different in cowboy loads? No, it's usually number 2 lead. Usually, they're not going to put the cost to put pure lead into it. So it's just regular lead, works just fine. It's not specially hardened or whatever. But the hardest lead is still a whole lot softer than any jacket. And if you have a barrel that likes to lead for some reason, here's a trick you can try. You can actually get more leading from hard lead than soft lead. It just depends. But here's a trick, okay, for casting that I found years ago. I'll take a 5-gallon bucket. I'd take a towel or an old whatever, put it in the bottom of the bucket and put about 6-8 inches of water in it. Okay. Make sure the towel stays on the bottom. I would pull the mold where I cast the bullet, and when I got ready to knock it out, I would drop it into that bucket from about that high. Now, when you drop it, move the mold to make sure a drop of water don't come up and hit the mold. That would be bad, because if you close it up, it'll stick hot mold in it. You got to let it be bone dry. So don't go down there at the water and dump it, and a drop of water come up and land on it. Well, that mold's 700 degrees. You think, oh, water won't stay there. You'll close it. Everything's fine. You go to put lead in it, and it spits everywhere because of that. So do not. But the point being is, you can quench that bullet in water and harden lead like you harden metal. And so I used to do that for rifle, for like a 30-06 I had. The bore was a little I found that I could harden the lead, and leading got less. I didn't have to use gas check because I was using harder lead in it. So it's just an old, down and dirty trick. Once I get around to doing reloading on Rumble, I'm going to bring out all these old tricks about 2 types of lead and casting lead bullets for all kinds of stuff, hunting ammo, and etc. How to reload. It's not complicated, but you got to think and pay attention. The Essie knives, Chris, the Essie knives are decent knives. I have not owned an Essie knife, but my good friend Micah has. His bushcraft knife is an Essie, and he's been very happy with it. And he's done a lot of work with it. So I've seen them, saw them at Blade Show. They seem to be decent knives. Jerry Donnell, no, you can't borrow my blue bottle. Dead Prepper. Everybody wants to know what Blackie thinks about Bigfoot. What are your thoughts on Bigfoot or the Georgia Mosquito Man? Okay. as I've told this before. When me and my wife got married, we did this big honeymoon, and we ended up going to see the Smithsonian at part of it. And at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, on display, they had a Bigfoot. Now, when you came up to the case, there's this 8-foot tall Bigfoot, like mannequin. And then beside it, they've got parts of a skeleton, part of a jaw, part of a cranium, part of an arm, part of whatever, da da da. And then on the bottom of the plaque, it says this is a Australopithecus gigantus, I think's the name. And it said common name rock ape, existed in North America, Asia, and Europe, went extinct 10,000 years ago. This is not a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Now, you admit such a creature did exist, and it lived in North America up until 10,000 years ago. That's not in debate. And as I pointed out when I've told this story before, when I was a little boy in school and they were talking about such history, and they were talking about woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and flat-faced bears and gigantic buffalo and all the megalofauna that went extinct in the Younger Dryas event, I would have remembered if there was an 8-foot ape walking around in that listing. But they never mentioned it. And yet, here it is in the Smithsonian. So could such a creature exist? It did exist. Could it exist today? I think such a creature could exist possibly in the way back of Alaska, Siberia, northern Canada, maybe. Someplace where there ain't no people. Yeah, I'll give you the possibility. In the eastern woodlands of the United States, we've fought wars here. We've had Great Depressions here. If it walked, crawled, or flied, we've killed it and we've cooked it at least once. And nobody has showed up with Bigfoot chops or Bigfoot steaks. And yet we hunted with dogs here in the South. So no matter how evasive it was, the dogs would find it. Skunk ape, swamp ape down in the Okefenokee Swamp and the Everglades and all like that. If such a creature exists, it would have to be in those places. I do not believe it could exist in the lower 48, even if it was that evasive. I believe we would have found one, or one that got hit by a truck, or died of whatever, or dogs or whatever, or tore it apart. Back when we were all dog hunting so much here in the South. So that's my thoughts on them. Blackie, what are your thoughts about wheel weights? They are good enough for round ball. Can be. They can be too hard. Educate yourself. There are wheel weights that are zinc that look the same, but they're kind of more like aluminum. You can't use them. They're way too hard. Like the copper, it'll wear out a barrel. You can never, if you melt them together, because they got a similar melting temp, if you ever melt them together, you're screwed. You can't ever get it back out. So educate yourself. But what's the difference between a zinc weight and a lead weight? But yeah, I've used wheel weights many times to make bullets. If you cook it longer, I used to use a pretty good sized pot, and I'd put it on a propane cooker like for a fish fry. And I'd let that sucker cook for an hour and keep skimming off the top. If it's got too much tin, too much whatever hardener in it, it'll cook out eventually if you just keep the temperature up and keep stirring it about every 20 minutes. It'll keep floating at the top and then flux it with a little bit of wax. You can soften lead a little bit. So if the wheel weight is a little too hard for doing muzzleloading stuff because it's not engaged in the rifling, you can cook the lead a little bit longer in the melted form and get it softer. Just like if the lead's too soft, like I said, you can drop it into water and harden it for use in other guns. Little tips or tricks. Tim Lacey, Blackie, what is your opinion of the M81 Glock knife? I've only seen them. If I've held one, I don't recall right off the top of my head. Glock didn't make junk anything, but I haven't seen one. And for a field knife, I think they're a little bit too straight. The one that I'm thinking of is almost like a bayonet. and I wouldn't be a good choice to me for use in the field. It'd be better than nothing, but it seems to be a little too narrow and a little too thick for doing field work. Good for a fighting knife, not so much for a working knife. Oh yeah, Dance was empty. Those cheaper than dirt knives, yes. And what was that? Bud K. Bud K. Remember them? Oh my God! You what? Whew, they'd send you that catalog, and it was just Pakistani heaven, boy. So many kinds of knives. Jerry Donnell, what did the chimp or the gorilla get loose you talked about from the zoo? There was a place in Florida that was a roadside attraction that had chimpanzees, monkeys, and I think two or four silverback gorillas, and it got destroyed in one of the hurricanes, and they got loose. And if you'll do a search on Google for gorilla in Alabama, it will bring up the news report of where up there in Talladega National Forest a few years ago, I think 2015, 16, something like that, that a silverback gorilla walked down Main Street at 12 o'clock when everybody was in this little bit diner eating in that small town. He just come walking down Main Street, you know. And the other one is if you do a search for skunk ape, you're going to get a picture of this lady took in Tallahassee. And there's this ape with this big old frond, thing in front of it. It's obviously an old chimpanzee with like a goatee like mine. And that's one of them that got loose from that thing. So um, I've seen pictures of a silverback gorilla in my neck of the woods that they were trying to catch. They were bringing in dogs trying to find it because they had seen it on game camera pictures. And then where my gathering is held in Geneva State Forest, it's 7,000 acres. It butts up against the 70,000 acres of Conecuh National. And on the far end of that, last year or year before, it was raining cats and dogs right before my event. And somebody was on the interstate, which is that barrier, the boundary on the far side. And they claimed to see what they thought was a Bigfoot go up over the fence and go into the forest. Probably what they were seeing was actually that one of those gorillas that's living down there. But nature will find a way. We had a tornado wipe out a farm that grew ostriches, had a big ostrich herd. And for several years there, and you still hear reports from time to time about guys being hunting and an ostrich comes walking up, you know. So we've got wild ostriches in lower Alabama, monkeys and stuff down here in Florida. You got anacondas, we got world record alligators in Alabama. It's a zoo. Jurassic Park come to Alabama. You don't know what's going to walk up in the middle of the night down here. Uh, in fact, that was one thing that Bear and I was talking about. His pond has now got about a 12-foot gator in it, and it's like a 30-foot, 40-foot up the bank from the river just to get up onto the bank to come toward it. And we figure it followed that little trickle of a stream all the way up there. So now we got like a 12-foot, 14-foot alligator in his pond. We're going to do a video on that one day and go up and take a look at it. Hello, Snapper. Didn't see you were there. Mark Burris. Heat treating hard cast lead. You just drop it into water while it's still hot and it'll quench it. Lead, when quenched, hardens. Brass is the opposite. Brass, when you drop it into water, it softens. So, one of them things. Catching up. Yeah. It'll kill. They used to add zinc to iron to strengthen. Yeah, it's correct. I worked in a foundry back in the early 90s for a year or so, and it was a zinc foundry, and got a lot of experience around the zinc. And number two zinc is hard, dude. You think it's cast aluminum. It's not, it's zinc. So Northwest Florida skunk cake, I can confirm that was a pic of a chimp and not me. Yeah, true. But yeah, that's what it was. It was a chimp that somebody had. All those animals had come out of labs, had been rescued from lab experiments. Even the silverbacks, and were that roadside attraction, and they got loose. So. Brian Bell, yeah. There's several places there in Alabama that make really nice Damascus knives and gear. Used to be a guy who used to come to gun show down here all the time, and he had blanks that you could ground in water, and he had all kinds of buoys and knives and dirks and whatever. Just beautiful Damascus. And in fact, Billy Watson, a good friend of mine from years ago, he could put your name in the pattern where your name would act. You could hold it Damascus and see your name in the pattern. So it'll kill. Ever heard about atmospheric rivers? Yes. We have them quite often in Alabama, but California is getting an education. It's where that jet stream comes across the Gulf, and it's just sucking moisture like a train, and it doesn't just go by; it sits there, and then it slowly moves. Well, it's constantly like a freight train pulling. Well, it's hitting California where it's sucking up from the lower Atlantic all that warmth and just blowing in there, and just like it is here in Alabama. They're just not used to it. Hello, Bear. Tim Lacey, glad to help. Ranger Survivalist and Fieldcraft YouTuber. That name seems to ring a bell to me, Jerry. Not right off the top of my head, but it does ring a bell. Steve, do you ever use a bug net when hammock camping? I haven't seen you talk about it in your setups. Do you determine if you need it or not? Down here in my south, you need it. Okay. I always use a bug net during the bug season. Now, like right now, virtually bug free. A little one now and then. There's a magic point that's coming sometime in March, maybe it's April. And when it happens, it's like mosquitoes just hatch by the billions. And if you do not have a bug net, you're not sleeping. They will just eat you alive. If you try to sleep without it, you'll wake up looking like you got chicken pox. You'll just be covered in bites. So I always use a bug net in the warmer times of year where there's going to be. A lot of times when you see me doing stuff, I move mine off to the side or I take it off the hammock so I can talk to you better and I'm not inside of it. But I always camp with one if there's going to be the possibility of bugs. Because down here, they will eat you up if you don't have one. David, hello. Has Military Heritage ever offered a Harper's Ferry rifle? I don't think they have. I don't think I've ever seen one of them through them. Alice Taylor, I thought the Baptists were in charge. Shh, don't tell them. Maybe Fudd lore. Yeah, you'll be amazed when people say they experienced something and they've never have. I agree with that. Yeah, Bill Van. That they just came up with a fancier name. But if you'll watch time lapses of the weather here in the South, it's the rule really for us is to have these atmospheric rivers. It's rare to have the other type. So, but different parts of the country, they're not set up for it out there in California. They don't even have the drainage ability. I remember when that first river hit like a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, and they got 2.75 inches of rain and it flooding in the streets and cars being washed away and everything. We got 7 inches of rain in 12 hours, 24 hours, a couple of weeks ago down here. And we had a couple of minor flash floods from it. The road was closed about 5 hours and they were able to reopen it where it just washed out and just come in, dropped a new pipe, dumped in dirt, paved over the top of it. 7 inches. But we're set up for it down here. Our creeks and rivers and city drainages are all set up. They sure ain't out west. And I feel sorry for them really when they get it because they're really not set up. I don't want anybody hurt, but I'd love to see a Category 4 hurricane hit New York City. I mean, those glass canyons up there. Remax, Blackie, how far is Kaufman Surplus from your gathering? About a 18 or 20-minute drive. And when we have my gathering, we do go out. Usually we need people to stay at camp and guard the gear. Okay. So normally like on Friday, group 1 will go out and I'll go with them before lunch. And then we'll come back and then group 2 will go out like at 2:00 and I'll go with them. And we go to the surplus place because everybody wants to go with Blackie. And so I'll guide them over there. We'll carpool over, whatever. So that's an annual tradition of my gathering is we go to the surplus place. And they will, if we say we want to come on Saturday, they will open up for us because I normally come in with 18, 20 people, Oh, cool. What kind of motorcycle did you get, Snapper? Yeah, briar smoke. It can't soak into pavement concrete, and that dirt out there is packed hard. You'd think the desert would absorb, but it doesn't really. It wants to run off the surface because sand is just tiny rocks, really. And so it just wants to run off. I got you, Tim. Yeah, Jeff, I saw that, and that's a nightmare scenario to them. If you go back in that same series, they talked about a Cat 5 hurricane hitting New Orleans, and then like a year after that's when Katrina happened, and it did hit. Uh, New York City, those big skyscrapers are rated, I think, 120, 130-mile-an-hour winds, and that's it. But the fact about them big hurricanes is it ain't going to happen for an hour. It's 10, 12, 14 hours for it to pass. And it'll things that could take it for a short time can't take it for the long. That constant flexing, glass starts falling out and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, Gray Wolf, cool. A friend of mine's son passed away. Um, oh God, 15 years ago, and he had a couple of guns. And so the family had asked, would I come down and look at the guns to see if they were of any value? And I said, sure. And so I went with him down there to North Florida. And the son ran a small car shop where he would uh, redo your car, repaint, new interior, all that, upgrade. You could pull in a rusty 62 Chevy and 5 months later it'd roll out with a custom paint job, custom motor, everything, custom work. Well, I went there and I looked at the gun. They were okay guns. But what caught my attention, because they're going through his stuff to sell it, and mom and dad didn't know, And I looked out in the garage and there was something under a tarp. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, that's the motorcycle. It's not, it's in parts. We're going to sell it for like $100. Hold on a minute. I went out there and I pulled the tarp off of it. It was a World War II Harley Davidson that he had painstakingly restored. It wasn't all together. It was all together. The gas tank wasn't on it. The gas tank was sitting on the workbench where he was putting custom stripes on it. That was it, and he was going to sell it for $100. The hell you are. Let me call friends of mine that are in a bike club. Let them get down there. 5 or 6 of them left and drove down there on their Harleys, because they were Harley guys. And they looked at it. And this was a U.S. World War II issue Harley Davidson, that he had restored it to what had been back then. The thing on the tank was the markings that had been on the tanks, what he had been putting on their pinstripe, And that was it. They offered good money for it. But they didn't know. It's just an old motorcycle. It's in pieces. Yeah. I don't ever get so lucky like that, but The 600 sport bike, cool. I rode bikes when I was young. My first personal power vehicle was a Yamaha 125 Enduro when I was 13 years old. You couldn't ride it on the road. You can't have a license. I can ride up and down the side of the road all I want, though, can I? And I used it for hunting and fishing and camping and everything else. But I was on a Kawasaki 1100 in 1979. And the front wheel blew up at 125 miles an hour and blew off the rim, hit a chuck hole. And it wasn't even my bike. It was a friend of mine's bike that he just got a pair of brand new headers and wanted them. We bolted them on and he wanted to hear them. But he'd broke his leg on a dirt bike race like a week before, and he had his leg in a cast and he couldn't shift. And so he wanted me to ride his bike, and then him and his brother would run along behind me on his car to hear the bike. He wanted to hear what it sounded like. And so I'm winding out that 1100, and I was like at 125 when I hit a chuck hole and the front wheel just exploded. And God smiled. I made a deal with God. You get me off this thing, I'll never get back on. And when it got done flipping, I was over 300 feet away when it finally came to a stop and I fell off of it. I had 1/2 inch long cut right there where something in the grass got me. Not a mark on me. The bike was in giblets. I made a deal with God. You get me off it. And I have never been back on a motorcycle since. Man just got to know his limitations. I don't mind. When we were at the Silver Wolves class in Ohio up there, James Bender wanted me to get on his four-wheel ATV and run up the hill. I'm going, and I told him that story. He said, "Well, let's look at it. 1, it's not a motorcycle. It's got 4 wheels. 2, a preacher is telling you to get on it. So I don't think you're violating your deal with God." So I got on it and I put it up the hill with it and stuff like that. But that's the first time I've been on a power bike since 1978 or 9. Well, guys, that's 1 hour and 50 minutes. I think we're going to call it quits for the night. Thank you so much for all the comments and stuff. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, I'm going to the woods this weekend. I do have videos set to post. And so everything should be good. And I'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have some video to show you that. And maybe you'll get to see me flipping upside down in a canoe and all kinds of stuff. We'll see. Till next time, guys, safe journeys, be safe, and have a great weekend. Talk to y'all next time. Bye-bye.